It is a fig leaf and a way of weaponizing anti-Semitism that has enabled Donald Trump to do what he's doing, that has enabled the slaughter of thousands upon thousands of children and women and men, for that matter. It is not keeping Israelis safe. And this type of conflation, Ethan, is what I find far more irresponsible, frankly, than the idea that he said pause at any time. I mean, look, you do a show Sam, 4 hours a day. He does a show 5, or as far as I can tell, 15 hours a day. And to focus in on that one tiny clause.
This is not one tiny clip, Sam. Well, you don't know. This is a totality of behavior.
But you
and by the way, it's easy.
And
I appreciate that you can hand wave it away and say that it doesn't.
No, I'm not hand waving it away.
Well, you kind of are.
I'm saying this inflation.
You're saying actually I'm wrong for caring about it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another video in my one-shot series. I'm expanding the definition a tiny bit. It used to mean just doing one take and not editing a video. I'm just going to make them like shorter videos where I'm not like reading off anything. But even for today's video, I'm going to read off a little bit of an article to prove my point, because I want to talk about the constant conflation of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, which has got us into a place where they're passing, or they're going to pass, a law in Congress that is allegedly fighting against anti-Semitism. And also, you might have seen the headline recently, they are making sure that Christians can still be anti-Semitic. And if they say stuff like, the Jews killed Jesus, that's not going to be covered in the bill. But if you criticize the state of Israel, that could be considered anti-Semitic. And I want to talk about this in relation to Ethan, Klein, Hasan, and the recent debate between Sam Seder on this issue, because I don't want to actually cover the debate, but I do want to focus on one specific clip that's going viral. You might have seen it, where Sam Seder basically says, policing people's criticisms of Israel and labeling criticism of Israel as anti-Semitic is how we are getting in the place of what I've called before woke fascism, weaponizing identity politics and the language of anti-racism to protect an apartheid state, annihilating another civilization in Gaza. So I want to talk about all of this today, but just a quick shout out. Thanks so much to all the kind people who donated. My girlfriend is running a half marathon for medical aid for Palestinians, and we've, I think, nearly hit an extended goal of £1,000. So let's go for even more. We've got 2 weeks left. Let's raise as much money as possible. And thank you so much to anyone who's given and anyone who gave to my fundraiser for the same organisation at the end of last year. So let's get more into the video. So before we get into the clip I'm going to show you today, it's a bit of a long one, about 4 minutes. I'm going to try and cut it down where I can. I just want to talk about using the worst crime of the 21st century, what Israel's doing in Gaza, as the backdrop of your personal beef with other creators. I think is just really gross, and I think starts making the issue not seem trivial, but it starts making it just appear as content. And that's my general criticism of Twitch streamers, debate bros. I don't even think a lot of them, not talking about Hasan here, I don't think even a lot of them care about political issues and care about politics. It's all just a fight and a debate. Now, even the iDubbbz video on Ethan, which is warranted, I think strays a bit too much into the personal beef territory over this very serious issue. Yes, am I happy that there's more content making people probably more pro-Palestinian? Yeah, of course I am. Does it become a bit too much after a while? And even between Hasan and Ethan, and I'm putting the blame mainly on Ethan, the fact that he is doing this still, and he's still going after Hasan and going after all these creators who are pro-Palestine because he thinks they're anti-Semites, is just becoming absolutely deranged at this point. And apparently him and Hasan are going to speak, and I don't even think there's a point to that, because it's just a spectacle. Do you really think they're going to reconcile? No, of course not. They've been going at each other for ages, while at the same time, all of this terrible shit in Gaza is still continuing. And meanwhile, H3 fans, because of their parasocial relationship with Ethan, are just doing the most unhinged shit. You might have seen this recently, where one found Noah Sampson on a dating app, and they're talking about going on a date with him before confronting him about his pro-Palestinian advocacy. How insane this content is making these people is also something that needs to be spoke about. They've completely forgotten what the context is for all of this, and that is people, men, women, and children, having their lives destroyed, being killed every single day. And this is what you're doing with your time, and this is your worldview because you're listening to someone like Ethan Klein and you like him. So you're planning to do shit like this? It's out of control. I just wanted to get that out of the way because I feel like a lot of people now are just sick of these people debating. And personally, I think Hasan is a big positive for the left. I think he's a big positive for Palestine. I personally don't think he's anti-Semitic in any way whatsoever. Let's keep it real. If you're an anti-Semite in 2025, there's a way higher chance than not that you support the state of Israel. You just need to look at all the Christian Zionists pushing this new bill about tackling anti-Semitism, or you have to look at the fucking AfD in Germany, who are big on banning BDS movements while being like fucking Nazis at the same time. So I just thought I'd get that all out of the way. So here's the clip for you, and I want to talk about this because this is the most important point. So it's basically Ethan Klein bringing up a clip of Hasan saying that you're like a bad person and you can't be trusted if you've ever had positive feelings to the state of Israel.
So let me show you an example of something, and again, I know you don't care about the drama. To me, this isn't drama. This is one of the biggest, most influential streamers spreading something that I think is really dangerous. And you can agree or disagree, but it's a short clip, but I'll show it to you, and you tell me what you think.
This will never happen, but in a totally just world, any kind of, regardless of your background, any kind of fucking Zionist tendency should be treated in the same way as being a fucking rabid neo-Nazi. And you shouldn't even let someone be the fucking local dog catcher as Felix was posting if they've ever exhibited any sort of like positive feelings about the state of Israel. I'm so serious about this.
Now, by the way, he didn't misspeak. He doubled down on it yesterday. He said, no, I agree. That's what I think. Now, just to recap, he says, anyone that's had positive feelings at any point about the state of Israel is a neo-Nazi that's not fit to be a dog walker. Now, to me, that seems like extremely dangerous, dehumanizing language about what could arguably be 70% of the Jewish diaspora, and certainly probably people you know in your family.
Now, even if you don't agree with that, and I would say I wouldn't personally agree with that because there's loads of people like Gabor Mate who was a Zionist until he went to Israel and is now one of the biggest Jewish anti-Zionist voices, right? So obviously he had positive feelings towards Zionism for a lot of his life until he actually fucking went there in the 1990s. So I'm actually sure Hasan would agree with that, but he's a guy who Twitch streams 8 hours a day and just says whatever thought pops into his head. So even if we interrogated it further, what he's saying, I'm pretty sure he'd back down. Heard someone like me say what I've just said, right? So even the fact that Ethan Klein is hung up on this is stupid. But even if Hasan 100% believes it, that's not anti-Semitic. Saying that anyone who has positive feelings towards an apartheid settler colony that has been built on the mass graves of Palestinians, anyone who has a positive feeling towards that is probably a bad person. Is that anti-Semitism? I don't think so. But here is Sam Seder, thankfully, confronting Ethan, being unhinged about this anyway.
I'll tell you, there's some hyperbole there, but
that's
I think, I mean, he says Zionism, and I'll tell you what I think is really...
Sorry, I got to correct you. He says Zionism, and then he says, if you had positive feelings about the state of Israel at any point in your life.
I got to tell you, if you look at what's happening right now, and you have positive feelings about Israel...
He said at any point in your life, Sam. Just to be clear about what he said.
Would I have said at any point in his life, someone's life? But I just think this is such a petty, like the idea that we're going to police. Hold on, let me respond. You want me to respond to this? Like I say, I don't care about this, but if you're going to force me to respond to it, what Israel is doing right now is so far beyond the idea that someone says any time in your life or not or whatnot. He's talking about Zionism, and frankly, I think it's very difficult for me to understand how someone could have positive feelings at this time. Now, you want to say in the past and what? Okay.
Yeah.
Like I say, I will grant you at any time in your life that is too broad a step away. Let me finish.
Yeah.
But see, you go in and you're making this about anti-Semitism by doing this hopscotch about a poll that people had positive feelings that Jewish people do, and then therefore he is anti-Semitic. And honestly, that type of conflation I think is so dangerous and so disingenuous. I mean, I don't want to get too passionate about this, but I'll tell you something. I have had a guy who went to my bar mitzvah, my sister's bar mitzvah, my kid's bar mitzvah, sat at Passover with me 3 or 4 times, call my father and ask him if I'm anti-Semitic. Now, this is just one, that is just an example, an illustration of conflating when he's clearly talking about Zionism. Was it hyperbole to say any time in life, whatever? The fact of the matter is this conflation is dangerous for Jews. It is a fig leaf and a way of weaponizing anti-Semitism that has enabled Donald Trump to do the shit he's doing, that has enabled the slaughter of thousands upon thousands of children and women and men, for that matter. It is not keeping Israelis safe. And this type of conflation, Ethan, is what I find far more irresponsible, frankly, than the idea that he said positive any time. I mean, look, you do a show Sam, 4 hours a day. He does a show 5 or, as far as I can tell, 15 hours a day. And to focus in on that one tiny clause.
This is not one tiny clip, Sam. Well, you don't know. This is a totality of behavior.
But you
and by the way, it's
easy.
And I appreciate that you can hand wave it away and say that it doesn't.
No, I'm not hand waving it away.
Well, you kind of are.
I'm saying this conflation.
You're saying actually I'm wrong for caring about it.
No, yes, in fact, I'm saying this conflation is incredibly dangerous. It is disingenuous.
I think it's dangerous right now, to ignore what's being described as dehumanizing violent language for American Jews that have nothing to do with the word.
That is a complete mischaracterization of that.
It's not. He's not fit to be a dog walker.
He never says the word Jews.
He says a neo.
Listen, how many members of Kufi have positive feelings?
Well, let me say,
how many millions of members of Kufi the Christian organization have positive feelings for Jews. It is clearly not a function of their Judaism. It is not a function of their Judaism. And so
but
it
it
not
describes
specifically...
most Jews.
No.
Yes, it does, Sam.
It describes most Christian evangelicals, too.
It may do them, too, but it also describes 73%
so
of Jews.
that is not anti-Semitism. That is
Well,
about
I don't know.
a
What do you call it when somebody's discriminating against the vast majority of a racial or religious group, Sam?
I'm sorry. You want to look at evangelical Jews?
I don't care about evangelical people.
Okay, but I'm talking about the way you're constructing this.
I think
so you can say the same thing about Christian evangelicals, too. It is not anti-Semitism. It is not. It just isn't.
Like, taking one example in isolation, which is what we've done here.
Well, you're the one who gave it to me.
Ethan not only has positive feelings towards the state of Israel, he wasn't born there, but he went there and became a citizen. So when Hasan says something like this, he's calling out Ethan, but as Sam makes the point, as another Jewish person, saying that could mean loads of Christian evangelicals. And in American politics, they're just as influential, if not more, on the US government's direction on their policies regarding Israel, especially in the Republican Party, right? So it's absolutely unhinged to say. And also, here's the problem, right? If we're going to say that because 70% of Jews have a positive view of Israel, if you criticize Jews who have a positive view of Israel, that means you're anti-Semitic. That is just you defending Zionism as a part of Jewish identity, rather than saying Zionism has only existed for maybe 200 years, hasn't become popular until 100 years ago. And because Ethan doesn't know anything about Israeli history, the OG founders of Israel were not religious. They were not religious. That was something that became more popular in the 1960s after the Six-Day War, where people in Israel started to combine Orthodox Judaism with Zionism, right? So even in terms of the religious context, it's a newer development that has been happening, right? But then we have to say that religion and ethnic identity has been hijacked by an ideology based around apartheid and the subjugation of another group of people, right? So the criticism can easily be made without being anti-Semitic of if Zionism has become increasingly popular among the Jewish population, but let's also make it clear, not all of them, that's just a problem within that religion happening. The same way with many Catholic denominations and stuff, like Irish Americans are so fucking conservative, right? Despite the fact they were treated terribly by American society, now they are just these radical extremists, a lot of them. And we have to look at how that happened. If you made a comment that oh yeah, most Catholics who are anti-abortion are bad people. Imagine someone like myself who was raised Catholic then saying, oh my God, you're a bigot against Catholics. That is basically what Ethan Klein is doing here. And anyone can see it for what it is. He doesn't even understand what is the difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, because Hasan isn't anti-Semitic. What he said in that context isn't anti-Semitic. And if the majority of Jews believe something bad, calling that out as a problem within that community is not someone being a bigot against that ethnic identity or religion. That must be clear to absolutely fucking anyone. And thankfully, he is talking to another Jewish man about this who is checking his shit. So yeah, for Ethan Klein, with many of his random dramas over the years, it's because he got his feelings hurt. It's because he got called out. And it's clear his media bubble is so pro-Israeli. And even the stuff Hila Klein has said on the podcast, even praising war criminals, by the way, you can tell the bubble he lives in has cocooned him from actually having a rational conversation on this issue, because also he takes everything so personally. Now, again, I don't want to focus so much on Hasan versus Ethan Klein versus Sam Seder. This has real world implications. Like with Sam saying, Jews I know in my life are now asking me if I'm an anti-Semite because I'm against Israel because of people like you. And this is where it leads. This is actually the end goal of all this shit. And this is something that Ethan Klein has helped himself, and he's helped across platforms like Twitch. So Forward, which is a Jewish organization, wrote, why the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act now has a religious liberty clause to protect Jews killed Jesus statement. Now, I'll tell you as someone who's done a lot of medieval history and just has studied a lot of stuff to do with anti-Semitism in my degrees, the sentiment that the Jews killed Jesus is one of the oldest anti-Semitic tropes used to persecute Jews forever. In the First Crusade, there was this fanatical rabble called the People's Crusade who went first, filled with peasants and filled with people who wouldn't be accepted into the knightly groups and stuff, right? When they got to Hungary, they just started killing Jews because they killed Jesus, right? These are people who were on a crusade to save Jerusalem from Muslims, and they just did this because they were fanatical, and they're like, oh, well, you killed Jesus. And it's how a lot of Christians got on board with what happened in Germany as well. It's gone on for so long, the Inquisition, everything. Jews have been persecuted by Christians for basically 1,700 years because of the Jews killed Jesus, even though, of course, the people who actually did it was the Roman Empire. So Senate Republicans added an amendment to bipartisan legislation addressing rising anti-Semitism on college campuses that could be seen as a concession to Christian conservatives who want to protect those who preach that the Jews killed Jesus. The final language of the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act was posted online on Tuesday ahead of a committee vote. The added language, which is referred to as a manager's amendment and proposed by the committee's chair, Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, states that the legislation would not diminish or infringe upon any right to protect under the First Amendment to the Constitution of the US, including the freedom to exercise religion. This bill would also require the Department of Education to use the controversial International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, which classifies most anti-Zionism as anti-Semitic when investigating allegations of discrimination. And let's also remember what progressive rising star who might want to run for president one day also voted for bills that adopted this definition. Democrats who oppose enshrining the IHRA definition object to what they say would be the criminalization of criticism of Israel. Of the 11 examples of anti-Semitic speech the definition includes, 6 have to do with Israel. But for many of the 21 Republicans who voted against the bill last year, including Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, the problem is an example that says accusing Jews of deicide is anti-Semitic. The claim that Jews killed Jesus is widely considered an anti-Semitic falsehood. As the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act heads to a Senate committee for a crucial vote, 10 progressive Jewish organizations have signed a letter opposing the legislation for representing an endorsement of the Trump administration's efforts to weaponize anti-Semitism. So here's how the conflation of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism leads to something like this, right? So now everyone believes that actually being an anti-Semite means you're a critic of Israel. That is dangerous all around because that means you are lumping loads of leftists, including Jewish leftists, in with actual fascists who hate Jews and saying, you guys are all the same. You're all the same to us. You are all anti-Semites. You are all like Nazis and stuff. And this bill is done to protect Jewish students from people like you. And that criticism is absolutely insane because, of course, it's now being used to suppress free speech under the guise of protecting a religious and ethnic minority, right? Because that is woke fascism for you. Taking the language of identity politics, taking the language of liberalism and using it to actually shut down any criticism of absolutely terrible shit, because the language they use to justify their terrible shit is, oh my God, Palestinian Muslims hate gay people, therefore we must destroy every person living there and create new colonies on top of their old society, right? I'm pretty certain if you asked Ethan Klein, do you support this bill? He would say no, right? But that is also part of the problem. People like him don't realize how they play into this culture as well, how they play into these arguments against people like Hasan where, oh my God, Hasan, you're an anti-Semite because you said that anyone who has positive feelings towards Israel or ever did is a bad person, which has absolutely nothing to do with that person's religion or ethnic identity. As Sam pointed out, I'm just really sick of this argument. It's been going on since I've cared about politics. It was used to destroy Jeremy Corbyn, and Ethan Klein is basically using the exact same tactics that were used to destroy Jeremy Corbyn and were even attempted at Bernie Sanders. Doesn't work because Bernie Sanders is a Zionist who just has criticisms of Israel, right? And also he's a Jew himself. But they try this all the time, that anyone who criticizes Israel is actually an anti-Semite who hates Jewish people, while actually palling around and allying with actual anti-Semites to support Israel, because that's all these people care about. It's all Netanyahu cares about. And for a lot of people who support Israel, they want all Jews to move there in the first place, so they don't actually mind rising anti-Semitism in America and anywhere, which has exploded. And it's not helped by people saying that, yeah, if you actually criticize Israel, you're part of the problem as well. You're the anti-Semite, because what does that word even mean anymore? People are going to stop caring about it, because if you start calling Hasan an anti-Semite and he's as bad as Nick Fuentes, then people will never take that word seriously, because they're like, that's so obviously not true. Every time you're going to talk about anti-Semitism, I'm just not going to believe you. And they don't know how much this is rolling back actual fights against racism and anti-Semitism by conflating these two things over and over again. This is something our Prime Minister has also done repeatedly as well in the UK. So I'm really sick of it, and I think most people are waking up that this is bullshit, but it's still annoying to see this war against someone like Hasan. We're constantly labelling him an anti-Semite, while there are plenty of leftists who criticize Hasan for his Israel coverage because they think he's too sympathetic to the Israeli side, right? So that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.